Hi everyone, this is Zahra Anari. I'm going to talk about our project, multi-stage membrane configuration for nutrient recovery as fertilizer. This project is funded by Mass Center, NSF Industry University Cooperative Research Center, and the supervisor, my supervisor is Dr. Lauren Greenlee, and co-PI for this project is Dr. Greg Thoma. The take-home message for this study is that membranes can be used not just for contaminant removal, but for nutrient concentration and recovery. The motivation for this project comes from the fact that by concentrating nutrients in the wastewater, we can have higher efficiency of strew-wide precipitation. So the previous studies in Greenlee research group shows that higher concentration of nutrients would yield in greater recovery of strew-wide in an electrochemical strew-wide precipitation reactor. So by precipitating nutrients, we can have higher efficiency of fertilizer precipitation. Also, another reason is that nutrients can precipitate in the, as unwanted precipitates in the wastewater treatment plants, equipments, and by early removal of these nutrients from water, we can prevent this falling and decrease the maintenance cost. Also, we can, by this way, we can meet the wastewater discharge limits. So the goal here is that to pre-concentrate the wastewater, nutrients in the wastewater, and then use it in the electrochemical strew-wide reactor, or just concentrate nutrients and directly use them as organic liquid fertilizer. So we are studying membranes, pressure-derived membranes here to pre-concentrate nutrients in the wastewater. So the goal here is to investigate the effect of membrane polymer chemistry and pore size on nutrient recovery, and also screen the procedure by life cycle assessment to decrease the environmental impacts of the process. The objectives is to obtain a set of commercial membranes to evaluate the performance and conduct cross-flow filtration experiment and LCA analysis. Also conduct real wastewater experiments for monitoring the nutrient recovery. So I will go through the concept of nanofiltration very short. So the removal is dependent on both size exclusion and donnan exclusion. Donnan exclusion is repulsion by charge. So if the surface of the membrane is charged, it will repulse the membrane with the same charge, the ion with the same charge. Also, if the pore size is small, it will exclude the ions by size. So most of the nanofiltration membranes are negatively charged. Their surface can repulse most of the anions. But in terms of ammonia, since it's a cation and it's a very small ion, it's hard to reject it unless it's a very low pore size membrane. Like fine pore size nanofiltration membranes or reverse osmosis membrane. Here is the schematic setup of our nanofiltration module and nanofiltration cross-flow filtration system that we use in this study on the left side. So on the very left, we can see that there's a feed tank. The wastewater is kept in there, and it is recirculated through the system by a pump. And through the membrane module, pressure is applied on the membrane, and a portion of wastewater is pushed through the membrane. And by this way, nutrients are rejected and are staying on the feed side. So we are dewatering the wastewater and keep concentrating the nutrients on the feed side. At the final stage, the concentrated nutrients can be either directly use it as a liquid nitrogen fertilizer or be sent to electrochemical steroid reactor to precipitate them as a fertilizer. So we provided 7 different membranes, 6 nanofiltration membranes from very low pore size to large pore size, and 1 RO membrane with a very, since RO membrane is a very, has a very low pore size and it can be effective for nitrogen removal. We have polyamide thin film composite among our membranes with different pore sizes. We have cellulose acetate, we have polyether sulfone. Preliminary results, with filtering synthetic wastewater, including nitrogen and phosphorus, with an NP ratio of 10, we found out that polyamide thin film composite, they have better removal, mostly because they are more charged on the surface, and they can all remove phosphorus very good, because phosphorus is a large ion, also it's a negative ion, but some of them with the very low pore size, they could remove nitrogen more effectively compared to the larger pore sizes. We down selected these 4 membranes to test them in a longer term filtration, and with synthetic wastewater simulating poultry wastewater or with real wastewater. So if you look at the FTIR spectra of these selected membranes, they are all polyamides with similar peaks, but there is a slight difference on the surface of these membranes. So RO and 400 Dalton TFC membranes, they are fully aromatic polyamides, which makes them to have a rougher surface, which we will show in the next slides. And 250 Dalton and 300 Dalton TFC membranes, they are semi-aromatic membranes, which makes them to be more hydrophilic compared to fully aromatics and have higher permeation rates. So we tested these 4 membranes with filtering synthetic wastewater simulating Tyson poultry wastewater in 10 hours filtration. We tested all of the nanofiltration membranes at 5 bar. We considered 2 conditions for RO membrane. The realistic condition for RO is 20 bar, but we also added a 5 bar to be able to compare the performance to nanofiltration membranes. We can see that 300 Dalton TFC membranes has the highest phosphorus concentration factor, because this membrane had a high phosphorus removal, same as all the membranes. They have a very good phosphorus removal, but this membrane, since it's a semi-aromatic membrane and it has a more hydrophilic surface, it could have the highest flux and permeation rate among the membranes, so it could concentrate the phosphorus much better than the others. But since it had a low nitrogen removal rate, it couldn't really concentrate the nitrogen because most of it was passing through the membrane. Between 250 Dalton and 400 Dalton TFC membrane, they have similar nitrogen recovery, although 400 Dalton has higher removal rate, but slowly higher removal rate, but since it had a higher flux decline, which we will show in the next slides, it could pass less water through the membrane. So the water, at the end, the concentration factor of these 2 membranes were similar. RO membrane at 20 bar definitely had a good concentration factor, but if we want to stay in the low range energy consumption, RO membrane, since it has a very dense top layer, it's not a good option for concentrating these nutrients compared to nanofiltration. So the SEM of these membranes shows that used RO membrane and 400 Dalton TFC membrane has more fouling on the surface compared to the semi-aromatic membranes. It's because fully aromatic polyamides have a rougher surface that can trap more species. In the next slide, we will talk about it. The flux decline also for these polyaromatic membranes is higher, but semi-aromatics have barely flux decline during the process. So as I said, fully aromatics, they are more rough on the surface. Their structure is called region valley. So if you look at the green dots on the pristine membranes of RO and 400 TFC, we can see that the green dots are more filled out on the used one. It shows that the valleys are clogged by species and by contaminants during the filtration. It's easier to be fouled compared to semi-aromatic, which has a less rough surface and more hydrophilic surface. So the flux decline is higher for these types of membranes. But also, the rougher surface would help them to have a more selective more selectivity toward nutrients. So there is a trade-off. So the next step was to test the real wastewater with our membranes. So the purpose here, the target here considered to be ammonia concentration. We wanted to have a very highly concentrated liquid nitrogen stream at the end. So we chose a single step nanofiltration just to concentrate nitrogen. We pre-treated the wastewater prior to sending it to the nanofiltration system to take out all the suspended solids. We chose 250 Dalton and 400 Dalton TFC membrane to test for nitrogen recovery. It shows that at the final stage, we have higher concentration factor with 250, have a higher concentration of ammonia at 250 with 250 TFC membrane, and since it has a more flux and permeation rate besides the good nitrogen removal rate. So it's a promising membrane for hitting 2 to 4% concentration. And we will test it with a larger module to have higher capacity of wastewater, to test higher capacity of wastewater. And we analyzed the performances with life cycle assessment. We considered that if we have a multi-stage membrane configuration to have 2-step or 3-step of removing nitrogen and phosphorus in separate steps, and then combining them, combining the concentrates for struvite first recovery, and also the third option, removing nitrogen, the excess of nitrogen for organic nitrogen fertilizer recovery. We found out that the environmental impacts are not dependent on membranes. They are mostly dependent on the configuration. So multi-stage membrane configuration would have higher environmental impacts compared to single step. There is no significant difference for struvite recovery between the membranes, because the P removal is similar and P is the limiting factor in struvite precipitation. So basically, the membrane selection is not really affecting the environmental impacts, and it's the configuration that it has a major difference in terms of the environmental impact. So the conclusion here is that polyamide thin film composites are appropriate options for nutrients recovery. The slight difference on their surface has a huge impact on performance and the type of nutrient that they can recover. Polyamide thin film composite with a pore size of 250 Dalton is promising for ammonia concentration as liquid nitrogen fertilizer, and the environmental impacts are not dependent on the membrane selection, but dependent on the configuration. At the end, I would like to acknowledge Massender, Tyson Foods, and Garver companies for funding this project, and University of Arkansas for facilitating this project. Thanks for listening. I would be happy to answer your questions.